and effective technology-enabled participatory validation and reporting mechanism for selected government infrastructure projects that support the monitoring evaluation policies of the department, institutionalize transparency and accountability in the extractive industry, passage of the Freedom of Information Law and localizing the Freedom of Information Program, fostering industrial peace through the proactive and inclusive engagement of workers and employers in the formulation and or review of labor and employment policies, working together to create a holistic and integrated approach to improving the lives of children and their families, ensuring Indigenous peoples' mandatory representation in local legislative councils and policymaking bodies, and stakeholders' engagement in harnessing the value of PhilJEP's data. With respect to the COVID-19 response and recovery efforts, the Presidential Communications Operations Office added a milestone to facilitate the proactive disclosure of all COVID-19 related information from national government agencies. Its co-commitment holder, Youth Alliance for Freedom of Information, has additional milestones on the conduct of consultations on the FOI bill, convening of a multi-sector network of CSO advocates for FOI, creating a tech-based tool for feedback from citizen experience on access to information, and creating a tracker of public accessibility statements of assets, liabilities, and net worth among agencies. The Department of Education considered the distribution of computer packages to learners and educators as an additional focus area for participatory monitoring. Its CSO Education Cluster added activities related to lobbying for an increased budget for the last mile schools in succeeding years and monitoring of domestic resources of local government for the implementation of identified critical education inputs in the last mile schools. PS Link Public committed to conduct surveys among public healthcare workers on the extent of the implementation of the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act, specifically on their benefits and other entitlements.
So I call on each and every Filipino, be with us at the front lines of public sector reform. Be active citizens. And as our partners for change, let's continue to ask ourselves difficult questions. Let's listen to each other and co-create targeted and sustainable solutions. Join our crusade and let's go beyond numbers and letters, beyond complicated theories of change, beyond policy papers and lip service. Together, let's deliver felt and measurable results and make government work better for the Filipino people.
The Philippine Open Government Partnership, open by default, policy by the people, accountability for results. The Philippine Open Government Partnership launched its first co-created national action plan in December 2019. The international open government commitments that embody the plan aim to contribute towards addressing pressing public problems and achieving a people-centered, clean, and efficient delivery of public services and building a high-trust, peaceful, and inclusive society. Consistent with this aim, implementation of the National Action Plan started at the beginning of 2020, but this was hampered by the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in the first quarter. The expected delays in implementation of action plans of member countries prompted the OGP Criteria and Standards Subcommittee to issue a resolution allowing extension of plan implementation to another year until August 31, 2022, for the end of term of the cycle 2019 to 2022. The revised Philippine Open Government Partnership National Action Plan is characterized by the same co-creation process that made the former version of the plan the most extensive and inclusive of all the action plans the country had. This revision follows the basic requirements of the OGP's Participation and Co-creation Toolkit 2. Leveraging on available technology and innovation in the midst of the pandemic, the consultation process conducted with commitment holders, non-government partners, and other stakeholders was done using different online or virtual platforms. As government and civic organization operations revert to virtual means for the communication, consultation, and collaboration aspects, the process of National Action Plan revision followed with the orientation on the guidelines of extended implementation, the succeeding bilateral meetings and consultations done online through various online platforms.
Many of us have given so much of ourselves to make sure that this happens. So methodologies have been used, a lot of strategies, many policy changes, many program trusts have been tried and tested, all for the sake of making government at all levels, national to the local, to work for the benefit of the constituents in the communities.
Under the revised 5th National Action Plan, the government and non-government partners are committed to collaborate to achieve the following. Strengthen citizen participation in governmental processes. Enhance transparency, accountability, and participation in educational service delivery. Increase government data utilization through the publication of high-quality datasets on the Open Data Philippines portal. Establishment of an efficient and effective technology-enabled participatory validation and reporting mechanism for selected government infrastructure projects that support the monitoring and evaluation policies of the department. Institutionalize transparency and accountability in the extractive industries. Passage of the Freedom of Information Law and localizing the Freedom of Information Program. Fostering industrial peace through the proactive and inclusive engagement of workers and employers in the formulation and/or review of labor and employment policies, working together to create a holistic and integrated approach to improving the lives of children and their families, ensuring Indigenous peoples' mandatory representation in local legislative councils and policymaking bodies, and stakeholders' engagement in harnessing the value of PhilJEP's data. With respect to the COVID-19 response and recovery efforts, the Presidential Communications Operations Office added a milestone to facilitate the proactive disclosure of all COVID-19 related information from national government agencies. Its co-commitment holder, Youth Alliance for Freedom of Information, has additional milestones on the conduct of consultations on the FOI bill, convening of a multi-sector network of CSO advocates for FOI, creating a tech-based tool for feedback from citizen experience on access to information, and creating a tracker of public accessibility of statements of assets, liabilities, and net worth among agencies. The Department of Education considered the distribution of computer packages to learners and educators as an additional focus area for participatory monitoring. Its CSO Education Cluster added activities related to lobbying for an increased budget for the last mile schools in succeeding years and monitoring of domestic resources of local government for the implementation of identified critical education inputs in the last mile school. PS-Link Public committed to conduct surveys among public healthcare workers on the extent of the implementation of the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act, specifically on their benefits and other entitlements.
So I call on each and every Filipino, be with us at the front lines of public sector reform. Be active citizens. And as our partners for change, let's continue to ask ourselves difficult questions. Let's listen to each other and co-create targeted and sustainable solutions. Join our crusade and let's go beyond numbers and letters, beyond complicated theories of change, beyond policy papers and lip service. Together, let's deliver felt and measurable results and make government work better for the Filipino people.
The Philippine Open Government Partnership. Open by default. Policy by the people. Accountability for results.
Please all rise for the doxology and singing of the Philippine National Anthem.
Dear God, thank you for the opportunity to meet together. Please help us to come together to make this institution reflect your kingdom. Breathe life into our ideas and decisions. Help us build a team that has love and respect at its heart. Give us the strength to continue working for your kingdom in this time of pandemic. Lord, come give us the inspiration to be the best we can be. May we be a shining example of your goodness and truth within, wherever we are. Inspire our thoughts, discussions, and ideas, and continue to remind us that all that we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit of truth for the greater glory of you. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
You may now all be seated. Good morning, distinguished guests, and welcome to the Open Gov Week. Please welcome your host and MC for today, Miss Catherine Ruiz from Kaabag sa Sugbo.
Maayong buntag sa atong tanan. Good morning. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Maupay na aga. Thank you for joining us in this kickoff session, a special session with the Steering Committee of the PH-OGP as we start off Open Gov Week. Members of the Philippine Open Government Partnership Steering Committee, our commitment holders to the 5th National Action Plan, partners, and other stakeholders who are with us virtually this morning in this special session. Join me as we start the Open Gov Week 2021 celebration with the session featuring 10 years of meaningful and collaborative partnership, the Steering Committee in Focus. I'd like to acknowledge our friends, partners, and guests from government, both national and local, from the non-government sectors, civil society organizations, the academe, public sector servants, and our business friends from our business chambers and clubs. Thank you for joining us this morning. As you all know, the Philippines is one of the founding members of the Open Government Partnership that was established in 2011. Led by the steering committee, the PH-OGP has evolved to become stronger and a solid platform for convergence, advocating inclusive and responsive governance. The last decade has seen PH-OGP implementing four national action plans anchored on the values of partnership that promote transparency, empower citizens, fight corruption, and harness new technologies to strengthen governance. This year, we joined the rest of the Open Government Partnership global community in the Open Government Week 2021 to celebrate the gains, accomplishments, and the challenges of the partnership through a special session with the steering committee. As we adjust to the challenges of the pandemic, we are conducting this special session and the series of learning sessions lined up for the rest of the week virtually. The internet and other communication channels provide us the opportunity to reach as many partners, organizations, interested individuals, and the general public and engage them in our discussion, bringing government closer to the Filipino and providing the platform for us to listen to them. This session is streamed in various Facebook pages. We are flashing on screen the two main pages where you can also share in your personal Facebook accounts and your organizational account. So let us officially start this special session on the PH-OGP Steering Committee in Focus. To set the tone for this session and the entire Open Gov Week is the chairperson of the PH-OGP Steering Committee who will share his keynote message. Join me in warm virtual applause to welcome a truly wonderful man and a dedicated public servant, the Secretary of the Department of Budget and Management, Secretary Wendell E. Avisado. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Ms. Kathy. To my co-chair in the Philippine Open Government Partnership, Ms. Andrea Maria Patricia Sarenas of the Mindanao Caucus of Development NGO Networks, or MINCO, my good friend, Governor Daquila Dax Carlo E. Tua, President of the Union of Local Authorities of the Philippines, or ULAP, Dr. Annie Enriquez Giron of Public Services Labor Independent Confederation, National Public Workers Congress, or PSLING Public, Dr. Ador R. Torneo of the La Salle Institute of Governance, the other members of the steering committee, action plan commitment holders, fellow workers in government, friends from the non-government sectors, and development partners. Good morning to all of us. In 2011, as Kathy has said, the Philippines and seven other reform-oriented countries came together and established an international movement for good governance, the Open Government Partnership, or OGP. This global effort aims to make governments better by securing commitments from government and non-government sectors to promote transparency, empower citizens, fight corruption, and harness technology in order to change the culture of governance. Through the PH-OGP, the national government continues to recognize the important role of active citizen engagement in achieving its goal of delivering better government services to the people.
The partnership and collaboration of civil society has resulted in four National Action Plans or NAPs, which were implemented over the last 9 years. We have deepened citizen participation in pursuing government reforms by engaging a broad spectrum of civil society organizations, national, regional, and local organizations, the business sector, academia, and the public sector union. The action plans started with commitments that advocate expanded participatory budgeting, bottom up budgeting, and participatory social audit for public infrastructure projects, among others. These action plans progressed to include commitments which aim to enhance accountability and performance measurement systems, as well as leverage on technology for transparency, efficiency, and accountability. The Citizen Participatory Audit, or CPA, the Seal of Good Local Government, LGSG, PhilJEB's modernization, grassroots participatory budgeting, improving ease of doing business, freedom of information, full disclosure policy, extractive industries transparency initiative, and cities and municipalities competitive index are just some of the commitments that helped make the Philippines a global leader. As we continue to work for a more open and responsive government, we take pride in some of the gains we have achieved. The Philippines took the top spot in Southeast Asia for budget transparency, making us the most fiscally transparent country in the region. Our efforts on fiscal transparency and open government initiatives were recognized in the open government space. We are the first country to meet all the requirements of the extractive industries transparency initiative through the institutionalization of the citizen participatory audit. The Philippines is the only country in the world where the citizens are officially part of the state audit team. PH-OGP sustains the co-creation process and continues to change the culture of governance while we address the adverse effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Active citizen participation is made possible through the shift to virtual means of communication and collaboration. In particular, the PHOGP conducted several virtual meetings and consultations, two PHOGP orientations, and 15 one-on-one consultation meetings with government and non-government commitment holders. Agency commitment holders have also been initiated at their own online stakeholders consultations, forums, and meetings, totaling to 52 virtual collaboration meetings conducted as of date. As a result of an enhanced and technology-driven co-creation process, we continue to have 10 game-changing international commitments that are set to be delivered by a more convergent government that leaves no one behind until 2022. Hence, we were able to revise the current National Action Plan and started its implementation focused on the goal of making government transparent and accessible to deliver more concrete, felt, and transformative impact through citizen participation, especially in the time of the pandemic. It is important to emphasize that a good government is one that actively listens and effectively responds. This can happen in an environment where citizen participation is sustained and where the people have a safe space to contribute, co-create, and to implement with the government. PHOGP will continue to provide a platform for this collaboration. Moving forward, our goal is not only to promote OGP values and advance the mission of the partnership, It is going beyond the action plan and helping address the concerns of the people as they recognize the role of PH-OGP in providing the platform for meaningful and genuine collaboration. Moving forward, our vision should be a democracy that addresses both the harsh lessons of the pandemic and incorporates the incredible innovations of the open government community. And so, we aim to restore the people's trust and faith in the government and sustain them by listening better and doing the most that we can to deliver the government's promise to provide a more efficient and effective public services to the Filipino people even amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Sana po magsama-sama tayo. Ano man ang mangyari para sa Diyos, sa bayan, at sa ating mga kapwa Pilipino. Maraming maraming salamat po. And God bless us all.
Daghang salamat, Sec Wendell, for that very inspiring and motivating message. No? Indeed, the past 10 years do testify. The past 10 years has been marked by game-changing innovations in Philippine governance, no? And they do testify to the truth that we can change our governance landscape when we work together in common cause. And that cause is good governance that involves and is felt by each and every Filipino beyond this pandemic. We now take a look at the journey of the Philippine Open Government Partnership through the lens of past and present members of the steering committee with this short video.
In around I think 2011, I think the world was undergoing some changes because new leaders were in. Barack Obama was nominated in the United States. There was a group that are really led by some technology related and advocacy related governance, mostly from the civil society. So the State Department wanted to convene a group of reformers globally to see if they can introduce a concept in governance that is anchored on openness, transparency, and inclusion. And so they convened the groups, and then they invited the then Secretary Butch Abad. And at that time, Sec Butch was already the Secretary of DBM. And then, so we used the vehicle, the DBM, as the vehicle to now bring in the country into that. Initially, just a conversation. It was really just an experiment to see if there is an alternative way to bring in the civil society in the governance process. And then at that time, there was a general sense that we needed to create a new society that is both more open uh, and participatory. And also because part of it is because they realized that we wanted to bring in the civil society in the way we allocate resources. So that was the anchor. Because at that point, that was already a joint movement between a group of global civil society members and government. Part of the criteria in my mind were to select reformist leaders that have strong ties and understand the civil society. The criteria were forward-looking, open societies, of course, democratic societies, and then a very strong movement, or at least a what's the word? That there is a path towards inclusion and including civil society.
To operationalize the mission of the partnership, the PH-OGP established its first multi-stakeholder forum or steering committee in 2013. The membership was patterned after the OGP International Steering Committee, where both government and non-government sectors are represented. Through the able leadership of the Department of Budget and Management as chair of the then Good Governance and Anti-Corruption Cluster, the DBM was also appointed as chair of the steering committee. The other members of the Government Steering Committee are the Department of Social Welfare and Development as chair of the Human Development and Poverty Reduction Cluster, the Department of the Interior and Local Government as oversight agency for local governments, and the Union of Local Authorities of the Philippines to represent the local government units. Further, the non-government sector is represented by Integrity Initiative and National Competitiveness Council from the business group, Budget Advocacy Group Right to Know Right Now Coalition, and Task Force Participatory Local Governance from the civil society organizations, and the Asian Development Bank from the development partner. Back then, the PH-OGP Steering Committee was chaired solely by the government, who was responsible for convening the meetings and organizing a secretariat. A 2-year term for the CSO and business group representatives was set, and they can only serve a maximum of 2 consecutive terms.
We have been involved with the OGP since the first National Action Plan. But in the last year, we were able to reach out to more CSOs across the region. The story of OGP continues with constructive engagement and public service delivery as one of its core platforms. We thank all of those in government and civil society who have participated and committed to this process.
The Open Government Partnership provided a mechanism, an avenue by which we can engage further in the process of using open government data for promoting participation in local governance.
Through genuine partnership and collaboration with various sectors, the Philippines has implemented game-changing programs that further strengthen our position in the open government arena. The Philippines initiated groundbreaking reforms on transparency, accountability, and citizen engagement during the implementation of the previous action plans. Several open government initiatives such as grassroots participatory budgeting, citizen participatory audit, Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, Seal of Good Local Governments, and Ease of Doing Business have received international recognition. In 2019, the Philippines scored exemplary in the Open Budget Index, taking the top spot in Southeast Asia as the most fiscally transparent country in the region and placing 10th out of 117 countries in the Open Budget Survey.
But primarily, this representation means that there is an enrichment. Yeah, let me repeat that, enrichment of the quality of the discussions. A seat in the steering committee offers the opportunity to serve, to add to the ferment of ideas, to advance the OGP principles, well, in ambitious but still practical terms. You know, like your head in the clouds, but your feet still on the ground. And that's the mindset of the businessman. You know, I learned a lot from being with the OGP community, and I still am active in the community. But the business sector can certainly learn, as I have learned, from the OGP community's methods of consulting. Always consulting with constituents. And the method of co-creation, the co-creation process of developing programs. These are, to me, particularly unique OGP elements of governance and can be advantageously be applied and used by the business sector. So, you know, that's it, therefore, in the steering committee is the conduit for mutual enrichment of ideas and plans to spread the gospel of OGP.
Through the efforts of the PH-OGP, the Philippines is ranked first in Asia for budget transparency. And this was based on the results of the 2017 Open Budget Survey where the Philippines received an open budget index of 67. Now, this cemented our position as a global leader in open government. Now, because of this, the DBM was also awarded the sole Freedom of Information Champion Department for its commitment in ensuring transparency in public service. Now, for me, this sends a clear message that the administration governs with openness and accountability in mind. Now, to sustain these gains, it is important to constantly keep open government partnership a priority program, may it be through the National Action Plan or through other initiatives. Now, on the 10th year of the OGP in the Philippines, I congratulate and encourage the PH-OGP to work tirelessly, double its efforts towards a truly open culture of governance.
I think because this is already the fifth National Action Plan, and we've been through four already, National Action Plan, and we've seen that a commitment can best exemplify open governance partnership if there's really mutual understanding and committed partnership between non-government sectors as well as government. You will see that a lot of the agencies have responded to suggestions that were made during the consultations, as well as online, as well as in informal meetings with the line agencies. Maraming mga pagbabago na nangyari. So I think it has really been an improved process of co-creating the National Action Plan.
10 years after the formation of the Open Government Partnership, the Philippines remains firmly committed to promote and uphold the OGP values of promoting transparency, empowering citizens, fighting corruption, and harnessing new technologies to strengthen governance. With the continued leadership and commitment of the PH-OGP Steering Committee, the partnership has grown to become a multi-sectoral body which equally represents the government and non-government sectors. The members have become the champions for promoting the OGP values in order to strengthen governance towards achieving better public service delivery. To further strengthen the collaboration between and among the sectors, the Non-Government Secretariat was established in 2016 to work closely with the Government Secretariat in helping provide assistance and support services to the whole steering committee.
I am deeply honored and proud for the Philippines to be one of the founding members of the Open Government Partnership since 2011. 10 years have passed and we remain strongly committed in providing a space for constructive engagement between and among government and non-government organizations. In this time of the pandemic, the PH-OGP Steering Committee continues to lead and support the mission of the partnership that aims to craft and deliver co-created country commitments which are geared towards addressing OGP grand challenges on improving public services, increasing public integrity, more effectively managing public resources, creating safer communities, and increasing corporate accountability with our non-government stakeholders. Together with the members of the steering committee, we thank you all for supporting us in making our government work for the people. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay tayong lahat.
Daghang salamat kaayo to our Secretariat in the Department of Budget and Management and Code NGO for preparing that very wonderful video for us, and for taking the substantial messages, no, from our past and present steering committee members. Um, Sir Santi, you are the prophet of open government in the business sector. Thank you for your words, no, aiming for the skies while remaining anchored on the ground. As you can see, the audiovisual presentation is a good takeoff point, no, for us in introducing our next segment, which is our panel discussion. In our conversation today, we will hear insights from the current PH-OGP steering committee members coming from both government and non-government sectors. So our discussants this morning are the following. First, of course, is the chairperson of the steering committee, Secretary Wendell Avisado of the Department of Budget and Management, who chairs, no, the PH-OGP, as well as the DBM is the secretariat for the non-government sector of the PH-OGP. He is joined by other members of the steering committee from government. First is the President of the Union of Local Authorities of the Philippines, the Governor of Quirino Province, Governor Daquila Carlo Enriquez Cua, and from the National Economic and Development Authority, Assistant Secretary Carlos Bernardo O. Abad Santos. From our non-government sector, we are joined in the panel by the co-chairperson of the steering committee, Ms. Andrea Maria Patricia M. Serenas, who is also the chairperson of MINCODE, or the Mindanao Coalition of Development NGO Networks. With her are Dr. Annie Enriquez Seron, who will provide the institutional memory POGP, no, since she has been with PHOGP from its inception in 2011. She brings the Public Sector Labor Independent Confederation, National Public Workers Congress, or PS Link Public, Dr. Ador R. Torneo, who represents the academe, is with the LaSalle Institute of Governance, and from our business sector, from the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Ruben J. Pascual. So welcome to our panelists. Participants, again, please, you can join in the discussion anytime. Please post your questions or your comments in the Zoom chat box or in the comment section, no, of our Facebook page for those participating through our live stream. We have members of the Secretariat who are monitoring all of these platforms in order to consolidate your questions or comments. This is a good platform to get to know the SteerCom better and learn about PHOGP. Okay, so we will start. Our first question will be directed to the PHOGP SteerCom chairperson, Sec Wendell Avisado. Secretary Wendell, what are you most proud of in terms of OGP's intent to push the boundaries of government beyond business as usual? From your view, what substantive changes have happened where OGP was instrumental?
I'll be candid in answering the question. Though it can be said that it will have to take some time for transformative reforms such as open government policies to produce concrete socioeconomic and political benefits to the citizens. The PHOGP has been, in many ways, very instrumental in leading the way towards greater openness in incremental but powerful effects. Our 10-year journey in opening up spaces for constructive collaboration of government and non-government reformers have brought us riveting experiences vital to understanding the definitive effect of these policies. The implementation of our national action plans has in fact paved the way to strengthening accountability, transparency, and curbing illicit practices in government. Moreover, PH-OGP has provided us an avenue where our people can freely ask questions on matters that have been affecting their lives. PH-OGP has also enabled a two-way communication, which has helped us develop more felt and targeted policies aimed towards addressing public concerns on the ground. As we always say, PHOGP is not a solution, but a platform, and it can only be as strong as we make it to be. And I am much honored to have a chance to be working with leaders both from the government and non-government sectors who are very passionate and dedicated in breaking the barriers between government and our people. Over the years, PHOGP is strengthened by the people who believe and who continue to believe in its vision. And above everything else, it is the people who are here and those who have come before us which moved us for this initiative to flourish. And that is where I am very much proud. Thank you. I hope I have answered the question.
You have, Secretary Randall. Thank you so much. We move on to our next question. We will address the next question to the institutional memory, no, of PHOGP Steering Committee. So, Dr. Annie Heron,
Yeah.
ikaw, sige, your question, ma'am. From your view, ano ang mga substantive changes that you have seen, no, over the years happen where OGP was instrumental and where the steering committee has played a role?
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Kathy. And can I begin by extending our warm solidarity greetings to all the participants and my co-members of the steering committee and the distinguished panel from public sector unions. And you're right. I I have served, well, I've been a member of the steering committee, serving two presidents of the Philippines, four secretaries of DBM, and two co-chairs of the non-government organization. And I'm really privileged and I'm deeply honored that I was able to serve as member and having worked with excellent women and men in the steering committee, as well as the very dedicated support of the secretariat, both from inside Gov and from Code NGO, and then of course the ever reliable Department of Budget and Management. So let me start first. I was a member, elected member of the steering committee as representative of the Right to Know Right Now coalition. And it's very single focused issue, and that is the freedom of information, our campaign on freedom of information. From there on, I think because of the OGP being really inclusive and really attentive to the needs of the people, I saw the strategic expansion of the membership of the steering committee and the democratization of the selection process of the sectoral, as well as ensuring that there is a geographical balance in terms of representation. Again, because of the commitment of the steering committee and OGP, it decided to adopt a terms of reference, and that is to ensure that the participation and work of the steering committee would be efficient, effective, and accountable. You know, it's you represent a particular sector, and therefore there are certain expectation and accountabilities that your sector, which you represent, needs to be given and feedback. Uh, I also have seen the government-led creation of the National Action Plan, especially the first NAP. Again, because of that, it has evolved into being inclusive and participatory, the creation of the National Action Program. And this substantially improved the content of the National Action Plan from being first, it started with a lot of attribution to the usual target of government participating in the OGP to a very strategic target and focus of the National Action Plan. You know? And this is because the OGP and the steering committee ensure that there will be a series of regional sectoral consultation. There will be town hall meetings and recently the Dagyawan. No? So this really facilitates the inclusive and participatory approach of the OGP. And then because of the OGP, the public sector union was really given a separate slot. You know? That's why I was there from being the Right to Know, Right Now coalition and then being elected by my sector as a public sector union representative. And I think this is one distinct character or uniqueness of the steering committee, I can say in the world, because while it was said in the video that citizens' participation is quite expansive in the steering committee of the Philippines, it is about the only steering committee that has trade union representation in its work. And this is very important for us in the public sector union because the OGP has given us a very strategic platform to promote quality public services, to promote transparency, and also to combat corruption because fighting corruption and excesses in the government has been a problem. And we want to communicate to the public that public sector union is not a problem. We will not be a problem in committing corruption, but we will be part of the solution of that problem. And so because of that, we are able to pursue what we call sacred public services, strong, accountable, comprehensive, responsive, effective, and democratic public services. So these are the highlights. No? I can go on, and I'm sure I will be lacking of time but these are the very substantial and highlight of the changes that happened in OGP, where I think the steering committee has been very instrumental. Back to you, Ms. Kathy.
Thank you, Miss Annie. Yes, no, the sacred, I love the word that you use, the sacred tenets no, of public service. So, daghang salamat for giving us that word no, and that dimension to what open government partnership means for us here over the years. Miss Pat Serenas, I will direct the third question to you, Miss Pat. So the third question, which Ms. Pat Serenas will answer is even beyond or even before open government partnership no, and the values of the partnership, the non-government sector, especially our developmental civil society organizations, have already been doing deepening democracy work and participatory governance at the local level. So for you, in your view, what substantive changes have happened, or how has the non-government sector, in terms of its advocacies and initiatives, complemented in opening up governmental processes or in shaping the governance landscape? Ms. Pat?
Yeah, thank you, Kath. Good morning to
Hello.
everyone in this forum. Uh, this is the first forum for us here in the Philippines in joining the global celebration of Open Government Week. First, and when we were planning this, we already said that part of the discussion should also explain uh, who actually somehow directs the direction of OGP in the Philippines. And I'm glad that the uh, AV that the Secretariat presented, in fact, walk us through that history 10 years ago. So, and that history, of course, sadly, from the beginning, medyo hindi ganun kalakas or not very strong or not very meaningful ang participation of non-government sectors, and that includes civil society organizations or social development oriented uh, CSOs, including cooperatives and people's organizations, and of course our public sector labor unions, and of course business and the academe. Very important non-government sectors that that when they joined the steering committee of PH-OGP, something changed. Something really wonderful changed, I would think. Although we joined the steering committee after Insight Gov, MinCode is part of Code NGO. Uh, I think from that time, even during the time of Insight Gov as the lead or the secretariat for the non-government sector, uh, already massive na yung pag-welcome or very open na ang pag-welcome ng government into the process. So that Secretary Wendell talked about the bottom-up budget process. That was, in fact, a milestone in our engagement with government at the local government level and even at the national level, because there were policies that we were able to uh, advocate for at the national level with our friends in government, within government, for a more effective and more efficient and more, uh, shall I say, uh, happy compromise when we distribute the resources of government so that it really is able to answer effectively pressing issues of governance. So union, I think we have advocated, and as Miss Cathy would say, we have long really advocated for open, transparent, accountable governance. Many of us in civil society after the Marcos era, talagang we positioned ourselves as ensuring or helping in making sure that government this time would really be more open. It will not be headed by a dictator once again, and that we will have our say. No, after all, democracy is a government for the people, of the people, and by the people. So we found in OGP a vehicle or a mechanism by which we would be able to really talk to government more openly and on an equal footing, really sit down to think about what should be done to respond. Because in civil society, we're so used to first doing community organizing and looking at the problems with our partners in the communities, be it rural or urban. They tell us they realize what their problems are, and they also determine what solutions they need, no, in partnership with civil society. So that has been how it has been in PHOGP, where we are just eight of us in the non-government steering committee, but when we sit, we don't sit as Pat Serenas or Annie Hiron. We sit there as representatives, in my case, for Mindanao civil society organizations, and we sit there for our non-government sectors, and we bring to the table the richness of the work that we have done through all the years. So for 10 years, or maybe a little less, we have been doing that. And we look forward to really be on the table, still talking with government openly, demanding and even resisting if we need to do that. But we will for sure it's a joint partnership. It's a partnership that happens because we are open to talking to one another. So I think that's how we have helped in shaping the governance landscape, Ms. Kat.
Thank you, Ms. Pat. And we have built relations, no friendly relations, which obviously contribute also to a more harmonious discourse among us in the non-gov and the government sector. Thank you for your answer, Ms. Pat. The first three questions, we have tried to explore the evolution, no, and the implications, the impact of open government partnerships here in our country and the way we do governance. At this time, the next few questions, several questions, will focus on open government today, no? So, to give us a picture of the PHOGP today in this uh, really extraordinary time, let me ask Asek Abad Santos, our NEDA representative, to please take on the fourth question. In your experience in the partnership, can you tell us what makes OGP work, or what is its advantage, no, to us here in the Philippines? What can be gained by the National Economic Development Authority as an oversight agency for being active as well in the OGP advocacy? Asek Carlos, you are, please turn on your mic, please.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much, Catherine. And again, thank you for organizing this forum that we have. And again, on your question, I think that the Philippines' continuous participation in global OGP discussion benefits the country by way of providing guidance in further improving our open government practices in particular sectors. In fact, again, one very important thing is we did this for the governance sector, and as an oversight agencies of all other sectors, we hope that this model of co-creation of partnership um, can also be done in other sectors so that we can have more ownership of the different plans and programs we have for different sectors. Um, these are among these sectors, I think are the areas of digital governance, public service delivery, access to justice, gender and inclusion, protection of civil space and resources, and corruption, which are all likewise identified as critical sectors or areas in the updated Philippine Development Plan 2017 to 2022. As a member of the OGP, we are committed to develop action plans and monitor its progress, enabling us to deepen open government and continuously pursue governance reforms in our country. And again, our OGP commitment is a very integral and important part of Chapter 5 of the Philippine Development Plan. And the OGP membership provides us a platform to gain knowledge on open government processes from other co-member countries. And this has enabled us to improve our co-creation standards in the past OGP cycles. And again, lastly, the PH-OGP Steering Committee is a multi-stakeholder body which allows both government and non-government stakeholders to be more transparent and accountable in delivering and achieving our NAP commitments. So again, as I said, it's a very good model within the governance sector and the governance subsectors, and also in other sectors of government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asek Carlos. You mentioned three themes, no? Digital governance, access to justice, and protection of civic spaces, which we will be taking up because we have a question also coming from the the general public, or where we received it during registration. So we will go back to those themes that you mentioned. We will now go to the fifth question, but it is the same question really, but this time addressed to our partners in the business sector. We'd like to hear from the Philippine Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Ruben Pascual, for the same question. Sir Ruben, in your experience in the partnership, I know PCCI is relatively new to the steering committee, but in the transition, you would have been briefed as to the gains of the four national action plans. But can you tell us what makes OGP work, or its advantages for us here, no, in the Philippines, and its implications on our economy? What is in it for the business sector to be active in the OGP advocacy? So Ruben,
Ah, magandang umaga.
maayong
Maraming
buntag.
salamat kayo, Catherine. Magandang umaga, Secretary Abisado, on the co-chair of the steering committee, Pat Serenas, colleagues in the steering committee members, and civil society leaders, representatives of academe, and everyone, secretariat from DBM especially, and co-NGO. Maraming salamat and I congratulate you for putting up a series of activities for the 10th year celebration of the OGP celebration worldwide. As Catherine had mentioned, PCC is quite new in the OGP process. Although me personally, while even before OGP, I've been part of the government civil society partnership even during the first term of Secretary Jokno when we first established the budget dialogue group. So I'm seeing that it merged eventually into the budget advocacy group and now the OGP. And I congratulate DBM for your continued commitment to this kind of process. Um, it has been extraordinary times for for all of us. Um, it has always been the process as is always advantageous to the private sector, physically, PCCI. I I agree. This is while we create and identify certain solutions, this is definitely such a great platform to use, for advocating for reforms in government. The system of co-creation is a very unique process, and I think a lot of sectors will be benefiting from this. And over the last 10 years, DBM, the Philippine government for that matter, has been internationally recognized for its OGP work. However, because of the very challenging times since last year, I think I have not seen as much that I was happy to see pictures of how happy you were when you had your physical meetings and etc. And others, I saw you have fun. I can feel the energy of the sectors represented, and I was looking forward to all of these things. Unfortunately, we are still in an extended lockdown since last year. So main question is some of the advantages we have. I wanted to pose a question more than is has the OGP really experienced this kind of a partnership during the pandemic? Uh, has the partnership really happened been effective during these times of crisis? Maybe in a lot of ways, I see we did PCOO, did the information campaign, we do have, but you know, the time of pandemic, especially for the business sector, when about 4.5 million of our employees lost their jobs and about a million enterprises lost their businesses. We always constantly wait to be consulted, to be asked what should be done. Unfortunately, over this crisis, we've been left basically to ourselves. Unless we speak up in media or call on high government leaders to the extent of making a risk, taking a risk of antagonizing even our friends in government. We have to do this because we need to be consulted. At the beginning of the crisis last year, a lot of policies were happening and the business sector was never consulted. I was wondering whether OGP was even part of the consultative process of the IATF because what I saw as a process in managing the crisis is it is a committee led the IATF committee and that's it. Sometimes we are consulted, sometimes in various forms. But the consult, I wonder how the other sectors are involved here. So I want to see moving forward. The crisis is not over. I think we have a good process that I think we can use and current crisis leaders can adopt. There are other claims of the gains of the OGP. The gains are very clear over the last 10 years. The seal of good governance, the transparency initiative for extractive industries, bottom-up budgeting. It was very clear. But you have pointed out the ease of doing business as part of the OGP gains. Um, I, I'm not sure if the EODB process was really part of an achievement because this is actually successfully being done by government through ARTA and the NDTI. And we're happy that in that process, we are closely being consulted about that. Because after all, those who benefit are the small industries. So how do the PCCIC OGP continue to contribute? How do I see OGP continue to contribute to, to our nation building? Number one, I'd like to see a more active participation of the steering committee on the budgetary process. You know, in the budget right now, there are three agencies that we identify at PCCI that needs really some listening. This is DICT. They don't get the money for establishing the broadband. DTI has such a small budget. They're the ones who's using helping out the small enterprises. And the Department of Agriculture is a sector that can help us rebound immediately. Second is we'd like to see budgetary accountability and a special audit of the funds. I just reviewed this morning. We have released for Bayanihan 1 and 2 1.3 trillion, and it can increase to 2.0 trillion, and most of that went to DOH and DSWD. Where is the money? And this is something that requires audit. I know Congress is asking that already. One of the things required of these agencies was to procure from locally produced materials. Like for instance, for PPEs, many companies repurpose their their plants in order to supply, but the government agencies decided to import, leaving the local producers around. So these are sad examples. My aspiration for the OGP this year, at least after 2022 in this coming for the National Action Plan, I'd like to see a braver OGP process. In fact, last year we started discussing a very sensitive issue because it was sponsored by one of the active members of the steering committee about studying or reviewing PhilHealth because of the many questions that happened in PhilHealth. It was discovered that 5,000 PhilHealth members with an average age of 130 continued to claim benefits. So I think there was a proposal for us to intervene. But again, as civil society members, we are afraid of antagonizing government. I'd like to thank DBM for your work. I am just concerned this is election year is coming. There's a lot of money released for Bayanihan 1 and 2. We don't know how it works. All dispersed. There are talks about Bayanihan 3. And I just hope I continue to trust DBM as I have observed it over the last 2, 3 decades. So on behalf of the private sector, especially PCCI, we will be here to continue contributing wherever we can. Magandang umaga po sa inyo.
May buntag, Sir Ruben. And thank you for those pointed questions or challenges, really, no? Which makes the next two members of the panel, what's this, the questions for the next two members of our panel really will have to respond to the questions and even the points that you raised, no? So I'd first like to call on Dr. Ador Tornillo for the next question. So using the lens of open government partnership as well as coming from the academe, um, what more can be done for an efficient, no, a more efficient and effective response to the pandemic? And maybe some of the points also raised by Sir Ruben, no, in terms of looking at the challenges for the steering committee to be more active in terms of participation in the budget process, looking into the audit, no, of the pandemic funds, as well as the challenge really is for all of us to ensure that there's a more brave OGP process, no. So the mechanism is in place. Dr. Ador, loaded questions.
Good morning, Miss Catherine, and good morning to
Maayong
Ayong Buntag, and good morning, Secretary Wendell Avisado and Pat Serenas, our chairperson and co-chairperson, colleagues in the Open Government Partnership Steering Committee, and stakeholders and members here, our colleagues, no? Magandang umaga po. So let me just try to answer that question in light of the lens or the framework of the academe. No? So we see ourselves in the academe as a link between society, policymakers, and other stakeholders. No? And our potential contribution, if we're looking at COVID-19 response, may be seen in light of our nature and character as an institution. First, with the academe as an objective and independent bridge or link between the different stakeholders, government, non-government, private sectors, and citizens, no? With the responsibility of educating our citizens, capacitating institutions, no? And generating new ideas and innovations. And second, um, as experts in our own right, no? Within the academe, we have scholar practitioners, doctors, psychologists, epidemiologists, virologists, data scientists, economists, public administrationists, some of the country's top engineers and architects. And we are not just scholars, but also practitioners. No? In my opinion, no, and this is connected to our colleague, no, the previous comment, I think that involving the academe along with the other stakeholders, no, including business, private sector, non-government sector, in decision in the planning and policy making will go a long way in improving efficiency and effectiveness of government response to the pandemic. So it might seem counterintuitive at first. No, one of the things that I understand concerns the decision making is that involving more stakeholders might actually slow down the process. No, in a way that is true. No, it's an additional step in the process. But on the other hand, it also allows the generation of responses that are effective, no? That has a buy-in among the stakeholders and less likely to require tweaking or modification in the process, no? Um, I personally believe that involving stakeholder results into more efficient and effective response. No? Maybe the speed of decision making slightly sacrificed, but the effectiveness of planning and response is elevated. So I think in this regard, no, the DOH, for example, has done very well in making public pertinent data on the pandemic. No, many of us, including myself, our data scientists, we access, process, and analyze yung data that is regularly released by the DOH. We develop models and present it in ways that are useful to decision making and in ways that go beyond the presentation of DOH. No, we see a lot of insights in the data, and we can process it in ways that are useful to different kinds of decision makers, from the local government executives, no, to other non-government stakeholders. We I feel this is my personal opinion as an academic, however, that we remain as an untapped resource, no, and largely outside of decision planning. And I think involving us along with our colleagues in the non-government and the private sector, is in the spirit of open government. No, it's in the spirit of open government partnership, and not only that, but also the whole of nation approach that we embrace on how we want to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Just to give you an idea, even without prompting, we and the academe have contributed our own share in trying to respond to the academic. For example, my own university, De La Salle University, we're a private university, but as soon as the Philippines, we started yung initial stages of lockdown, we have opened our own COVID-19 research and resource portal, which lists many of our work. We have reoriented a lot of our resources without prompting and without request, no? And these are private resources, no? Towards addressing many of the challenges that emerged in the pandemic. My own institute, the La Salle Institute of Governance, as soon as day one of the pandemic, had been producing policy briefs that not only outline the challenges but also offer practical solutions and alternatives, especially for local governments at the forefront of dealing with the pandemic. We have the COVID-19 Academic Crisis Response Consortium, a collaboration between De La Salle University, Ateneo School of Government, and the Asian Institute of Management, which shows a lot of data, a lot of the technologies. We brought in experts from the countries that had successfully and efficiently managed the pandemic, no? And we put them together in one portal that includes all of this experiencing, these technologies, this data, and the results of our analysis that can actually be considered by our decision makers. So, a lot of examples: Leads for Health Security and Resilience Consortium, the UP Pandemic Response Team. There's no discounting. We cannot say that the academe has not been actively offering its own expertise and resources in trying to come up with a better response. I think what is left is, with the help maybe of the OGP and as mentioned by our colleague from the private sector earlier, providing some mechanisms and platforms for us to be involved. No, that is in the spirit of partnership. Kasi right now, when we try to communicate our response, as our colleague mentioned earlier, no, para kaming outsider, shouting out or trying to communicate our response. But if we are part of actually the planning, you don't have to adopt our recommendations. The government doesn't have to adopt it, but only consider it, see what we have to say, and see our solutions that we can offer. Many of these problems kasi na nakikita namin, very simple. Logistics problems, vaccine deliveries. We have a solution for that. No? And this thing, I think if we are given the opportunity to be regularly consulted, no, and not necessarily have to follow our recommendations, but please consider it. I think it will help a lot in improving our government response.
Daghang salamat, Dr. Ador. So we go to the frontliners in open government, in good governance, as well as in our present context in health crisis management and response. So we'd like to hear from the perspective also of our local government authorities. No? So we have with us Governor Dax. Governor Dax. So from your perspective, what can be done, no, for using the platform of open government partnership for a more efficient response to the pandemic? Governor, Maing Buntag.
Thank you. Maing Buntag, Naimbag Aldaw, Ma'am Catherine, to my idol, Secretary Wendell, and everybody in this panel from the academic business, CSOs, and other stakeholders. Gandang araw po. Sa ngalan po ng mga lokal na pamahalaan at ng mga lokal na official, first let me congratulate our DBM and the OGP platform that has been taking great strides towards transparency, towards accountability, and a more responsive government for the people of our nation. So tama po, nakikinig ako, dami kong napakinggan ng magagandang ideas at I think pare-pareho naman po iniisip natin na kung mas maraming tumutulong, mas marami pong magagandang ideas, maaaring mas maganda ang magiging kinalabasan at mas malaking suporta ang mahuhugot natin mula sa taong bayan. So, given those principles, tama po talaga ang direksyon sa pamumuno ng DBM dito sa OGP. That being said, we all know and we all agree siguro naman na a lot more can be done and more improvements can be made. At dyan po sumusuporta ang mga lokal na pamahalaan na hindi man tayo perfect, nakikita po natin malayo na rin po ang narating, ngunit tutulong pa tayo upang mas malayo pa ang mararating natin. Tama kayo, sa konteksto ng pandemya, lahat po ng ating mga nakagawi ang improvements, ideas, parang nayanig po lahat at we needed to reinvent everything. So parati natin naririnig that business as usual does not work as usual anymore. We need to innovate how we do business at ang mga LGU dyan, marami rin pong namuno ng mga LGU nanguna dyan sa paghahanap ng mas panibagong pamamaraan. Nagkaroon ng introduction of infusion of technology. Nabanggit kanina ang investment in digital infrastructure na kami po ay talagang sumasang-ayon 100%. Nung simulan po nung pandemya, ang ulap po ay sumulat sa ating mahal na Pangulo at isa sa mga in-emphasize namin doon sa sulat na yon ang pangangailangang mag-invest ng husto sa ating digital infrastructure. That helps also the way we govern. Kasi po yung mga tao nahihirapan pumunta sa munisipyo, sa City Hall at sa Kapitolyo. Gusto nila Facebook lang, gusto nila online lang. Pero paano naman po kung wala silang signal, wala silang wifi sa mga malalayong lugar? Hindi naman po kasi ang buong Pilipinas ay parang Metro Manila. Sa kada kanto ay may signal, maglo-load ka lang, pwede na po. So yun ang mga bagay na nakita namin na tinugunan naman ng ating gobyerno. Ngunit siyempre, hindi naman overnight mangyayari ito. Ngunit kami nagpapasalamat na nabibigyan kami ng boses. Tama siguro ang usapin kanina na mas maraming nagsasalita, mas gumugulo ng bahagya, mas humahaba ang proseso. Ngunit siguro, mas lumalalim din naman ang usapan. Siguro, at least, no question and no debate pagdating po sa larangan ng pagplano at pag-budget. Umpisa ng maaga, mas maraming boses ang na-involve. Siguro naman po, maabot natin ang time frame. Yun lamang po sa konteksto ng immediate response, especially during this pandemic. Kailangan din talaga mas strategic ang approach. Yung stakeholders natin dapat mas organized din po. Ang business sector dapat nag-uusap po. Hindi po sana may kanya-kanya silang grupo at kanya-kanya sila dapat konsultahin pa. Baka dapat mag-usap na rin sila at iisa na lang ang boses nila na ihaharap sa gobyerno upang sa ganon, bumilis din po ang usapin. Ganon din sa aming mga LGU, dapat mag-usap kami, magkaroon ng iisang punto at mailalapit sa national government for faster and more responsive measures. So, sa tingin ko po, Ma'am Catherine, una, muli kaming nagko-congratulate po sa ating DBM, sa steering committee, sa OGP, sa napakagandang hakbang. At kami nagbibigay ng 100% na suporta namin upang lalo pang mapabisa ang inyong mga hakbang, ang ating mga hakbang para sa mas responsive government for the Filipino people. So salamat po sa pagkakataon.
Maraming salamat, Governor Dax, for your response. And we hope to see you in better times na join us in physical meetings of the hearing committee. At this point, before we go to our wrap-up questions, we'd like to note questions coming from our participants. So the first one can be answered by our non-government and maybe even Ms. Pat Serenas, for this question coming from the floor. Do you agree that civic spaces are closing? So I think this also has to do with what was mentioned by ASEC Carlos earlier in terms of the platform of open government is also integrated in the Philippine Development Plan, no? So on the question of civic space, do you agree that it is closing? What are major challenges to forging open, effective partnership with civil society? It also relates to the concern raised by Sir Ruben earlier. So, Secretary Wendell or Ms. Pat Serenas, you may want to take this question.
Sorry, Kathy, I didn't quite get it.
Yes, the Secretary Wendell, the question is, do you agree that civic spaces are closing? What are major challenges to forging open, effective partnerships with civil society?
Precisely, that is our direction, and that we would like to give a more, if not ample, space for the civil society to participate in the budget process. But I have heard so much of the inputs, and I'm so glad to have listened to all of them, particularly those coming from Mr. Pascual of PCCI. Um, Actually, pareho po kami ng direksyon talaga eh. We'd like our government to really be open and ready to face all the challenges in tandem with all the sectors of society. And let me also say this very clearly that perhaps up until the time I'm the budget secretary, I will make sure that this process will be strictly following the National Action Plan in relation to our international commitments. And having said that, Mr. Pascual really came up with some basic issues that needs to be addressed. Particularly, for example, in the case of the budget and the way it's being allocated to various departments. And he mentioned very clearly about the need to revisit the budgetary allocation for the ICT in line with uh, advent of more technological advancement in terms of how we're getting ourselves to be attuned to the current trend, DTI in view of the millions of those who've been greatly affected by the pandemic, although we have tried coming up with some of the programs that were initiated by the Department of Finance in relation to those that were affected, particularly the small business rates subsidy program of between 5 to 8,000 pesos per affected employee, and it has reached out to about 6.5 million beneficiaries. And there has been a survey that was conducted, and all of these monies went really to the intended beneficiaries. On the going back to the ICT on the free Wi-Fi project, the government has demanded the return of about 21.85 million US dollars, or equivalent to roughly uh, 1.4 billion, uh, because we need to really be not only transparent, but in fact get the results of this project as it was intended to be. And we're in the process of doing that, government for that matter. And on the area of agriculture, um, we have uh, seen that uh, sector principally benefiting from the price tariffication flow. And in fact, we have the project intended, all of this, not only on mechanization, but also improving the technology. But still and all, I agree with Mr. Pascual that there's a need to revisit, because these are the pump primers so far as our country is concerned, being agriculture based among others. And I am happy to learn this through this forum, um, although I assume and believe that even our respective departments uh, have been consulting as well the business sector. And for that matter, I'd like to emphasize that we at PH-OGP provides only the platform, sirs and ma'ams, not the solutions. And suffice it to say that we are principally concerned about this, the sectoral participation in budget preparation, execution, budget utilization, management, and looking into the impact of all of this on the lives of the Filipino people. And that is what we would like to really see over time. And there's a lot more to do, Cathy and all the rest in the steering committee and all our development partners. And we will continue to share any and all information necessary, even with the ACA team, considering that they're the ones preparing our youth to what is in store for them, in line with what government is also doing. And please be assured that, as I've said, as long as I'm still here, I will continue to link up with all sectors of society, and even with the local government units, considering that starting next year, there will be more activities happening at the local level in line with the increase in their share of the national tax allotments beginning next year. So thank you. I hope I have answered the question, Kathy.
Daghang salamat, Secretary Wendell, no? As well for your generous offer of being that link, no? And to continue to further really open government and its principles. The next question, I think, has already been addressed, but for the interest of just acknowledging that we have received your question, but maybe even Neda would want to expound on Asek Carlos, your point earlier. The next question is coming from our public sector union. What really is the impact of PH-OGP in terms of economic growth and response to our current COVID situation? Our chamber, Philippine Chamber representative already posed not certain, I think, questions and even challenges rather than a response to this. So, Sir Ruben, you may want to also include if you have further thoughts on this question. But can I ask Asek Carlos if you want to take on this question?
Yes, thank you very much, Catherine. I think on the first part, a lot of empirical evidence is out there that looks at the positive correlation between institutions and good governance with economic growth. So again, it's a determinant of economic growth, and again, institutions, strong institutions, transparent institutions, again, feed a lot into the regulatory quality of a country, um, feeds into lessening or eradicating corruption, and all of this impact a lot economic growth. So again, institutions are very important um, for economic growth, and again, what we want with OGP is again strengthening our institutions, especially again in terms of the budgeting framework and the budgeting process um, of governments. I think it's clear. So again, anything that we're doing in terms of improving our institutions will impact on economic.
Thank you, Asek Carlos. The next question, yeah, Sir Ruben, would you want to add to this, or the points that you raised earlier are sufficient in terms of moving forward? Okay. Sige, so we go next. It's really not a question, but really a request, no, for an update on the status of the sub-state commitments as part of the fifth National Action Plan, and are there any plans for its expansion? To respond to this, I'd like to call on Miss Ollie Lucas, but I just before I ask Miss Ollie to answer this question, I just want to mention that in the fourth National Action Plan, we have sub-national commitments, no? Meaning local authorities, specifically the province of Albay, Surigao, and the province of Bohol, piloted open legislation, and I think the province of Bohol continues to implement open legislation for its constituents. But unfortunately, we don't have any commitment holder from local authorities for this fifth national action plan, except for maybe DILG's commitment, no, in terms of uh, opening up local governance processes, apart from the monitoring, no, of projects at the local level, which is also being complemented by Ms. Ollie Lucas's organization in terms of monitoring the implementation of such commitment. So, Ms. Ollie, can I ask you, please, if you want to answer this last question?
All right, fine. No? As Kathy has said, no, there is no local commitments or sub-national commitments in the fifth National Action Plan. But what we have innovated, or what the steering committee has innovated, is the monitoring of commitments that have been made. And one of the commitments here, the very first commitment that actually is in the plan, is the commitment of the DILG and DBM to strengthen, no, local civil society organizations in making their governments accountable. And in the case of DILG, we're actually talking about how to strengthen citizen participation in local governance processes. So perhaps that can answer your question. And what we have currently is a group composed of several CSOs. We call it the Citizen Monitoring Group, and we are monitoring that commitment of the DILG. Let me tell you that we have met with DILG and we have also met among ourselves, and one of the things that we have actually already said is that the commitment, one of the commitments is to create a national policy on CSO participation. But I think what we're saying is that, and that there should be town hall meetings, but what we're saying, what the CSO group is also saying, is that these do not seem to be enough in order to really strengthen in order to strengthen the CSO participation in local governance processes. And one of the reasons here actually is the fact that, CSO groups, we assume that CSO groups are very big and very large and very well funded, but that is not true. Now, I think that has also been the sense that you received when you did the BOD. Governments should know that the CSO groups are largely very small, and many of them are actually operating foundations or have specific projects in mind, and they're not into advocacy. And therefore, one of the things that we see here is the need to actually strengthen demand, is to create demand or strengthen demand, expand demand for to demand for a participatory processes. And one of the key here is that actually the participatory governance committee before created a resolution saying that it will ensure that a portion of the national and local government budget support participation of citizens and CSOs. So we would like to see that done. We would like to see how that is going to be implemented, how that is going to be actualized, okay? And then we want to be able to demand that that actually is put in the budget. No? That there is something here for to support participation of citizens and CSOs. so that there is not simply a space that you say is going to be open. All right, like OGP is a platform, but a platform is not actually usable unless it is used. No? And on the CSO side, on the other side, it has to be used by CSOs, and we I think need to understand that there's a lot more among that CSOs are not just the large CSO groups, the code NGOs, the social watch, the PCCI. There are a lot of smaller groups down in the communities, and they need to be able and who want to be able to engage but cannot engage, right? Because they do not have possibly enough staff, and we need to be able to capacitate them in order for them to actually also understand the language, because this is when we go into a meeting, it is very technical. And the technical language, the way how you frame it, also has to be maybe we need to be able to do that as well. So the one who I would like to invite the one who put in the question. I think this is Adi. Be a member of the commitment monitoring group. Just send me an email. You know my email. Send me an email, and let's push this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Ollie. So we'd like to invite other stakeholders who are here, no? Especially those with partners on the ground at the community level, to please join us, get in touch with us. How can we help each other monitor the commitments, no, of the fifth National Action Plan? Thank you, Miss Ollie. At this point, we may no longer have, no, we really don't have time anymore for other questions. Um, Again, we will have, if you still have questions or you would want to share your thoughts on moving forward, please post in the OGP webpage. We will also post our responses on the web page. In the interest of time, so we need to already move on to our next session. But before we go to our next session, which is just to wrap up this morning's activity, I'd like to ask the chairperson and the co-chairperson again to please address our last question. No? So what lies ahead for us in the Philippine Open Government Partnership? Secretary Wendell, has the pandemic shifted the landscape in shaping OGP directions? How? You may want to explore some of the themes you already raised earlier. Sec Wendell.
Thank you, Kathy. The pandemic has actually shifted everything in the world, for that matter, and has opened our eyes to the realities on the ground. And it has only proven that the values of transparency, accountability, civic or civil participation and inclusion cannot be an afterthought. The direction of the PH-OGP remains the same, and it is important now more than ever that the OGP value should be the focal points of our response and recovery initiatives in mitigating the effects of the pandemic. Through the PH-OGP and the projects and programs under the fifth National Action Plan, we are given the opportunity to create more concrete commitments to make our government work better for our citizens by creating a larger civic space in discussing public policies. Like what we're doing now, very important. And I'd like to really thank all those who have participated, because we need our policies to be targeted to alleviate the effects of the crisis, most especially the systemic inequalities, which were even more felt because of this global health situation. We at PH-OGP aims to strengthen inclusivity that addresses the lessons of the pandemic and integrates the innovations of open governance in our programs, projects, and activities. And so we have to move on and continue with what we're doing and face squarely all the challenges. For after all, That is the mission given to us by the Almighty God. And surely, if we work together, we will do better for our people and country. Salamat po, Ms. Kat.
Yes, we will. As said, thank you so much. Before I ask Miss Pat, are there other members of the steering com who would like to take on to also share their thoughts no, on this question in terms of moving forward, given the concerns also raised earlier? Anyone else? Miss Annie, Sir Ruben? No more? Okay, so I can I ask Miss Pat? Miss Pat, as a way of also closing the panel discussion, what for you no are the prospects for the next action plans? No, where will the steering com direct PH-OGP in the coming years, given our context, but also moving beyond the present extraordinary time that we are in?
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Thank you, everyone, for participating, especially maraming salamat, my Kodabawenyo, Secretary Wendell. Uh, it's always a pleasure joining you in meetings. Uh, and so with the other members of the steering committee, the present members, some of them newcomers to the committee. Thank you for joining this very important first session of the Philippines celebration of Open Government Week. At dami, I've written a closing remark sana na short, no? But I'm doing away with it because through the discussions, mas marami tayong natutunan, mas marami tayong narinig, mas maraming challenges that had been put forward. This is our 10th year, and we insisted that we do a review. This is not a 10th-year celebration. This is a celebration of the 10 years. Kaya maganda yung ginawa ng secretariat natin na summary or encapsulation of the 10 years no, from the beginning. But as we move on from the 10th year to our 11th, our 12th, and onwards, we know that the challenges are big. And I really particularly like the challenge posed to us sa steering committee by our friend sa PCCI. For the challenge for us to be a braver steering committee. And the challenge also by the academe for us to be the link with government to ensure that strengths that are out there that are not strengths within the government can be harnessed to respond to big problems that this country faces, particularly this pandemic. We are all sad that we are a global community, so we read the news every day. We read the news of how other countries have responded to the pandemic. It may be humbling for us to admit. It must be very humbling for us to admit that other countries have done better and that we have not done perfectly. And I don't think we're aiming to do something perfectly, but at least to ensure that all the strengths within the country are harnessed. So, yung sharing ng ating representative from the academe, from the De La Salle Institute of Governance, made me feel really, really sad that the plea to listen to them, they have the data, they know how to process the data. They're not saying you take up all our recommendations, but for us, for government, and through the steering committee, because we're government and non-government, to ensure that that happens, that we have a government that listens, a government that will ensure that we all contribute to the solution of problems that we meet. So maganda yung sharing this morning. Already in private chats, I was thanking people for their comments, but certainly to the members of the steering committee, I look forward to more meetings for us to contribute more, for us to be able to speak more, and to say our piece. Mandiho maliit ang problema na hinaharap ng country ngayon. At many of us in civil society are on the ground, maybe not face to face but online, at least with our partners in rural and urban poor communities. At ang buhay ho ay napakahirap. Hirap po. There are a lot of problems. Only this morning, I woke up to a lot of comments on Facebook about saan na ang vaccines. So we're not sure anymore that. Then I woke up and I remember that I had a meeting. I have a first forum, and it's the steering committee meeting of PH-OGP. So I said, what do I do? What do I say to make sure that PH-OGP means something to all of us, to both government and non-government, including our non-government sectors like the business sector, the academe, the public labor sector. Ano yun? Ano yung pwede namin gawin in the steering committee? To be a real liaison and a real link to parts of government, both national and local government, so that we ensure that ang buhay ho ni Mang Juan at ni Manang Juana in our rural and urban communities are not made worse because we have wrong solutions. We don't help each other. We are not open enough. So, noon ho, when I attended the last global meeting of OGP in Ottawa, already 2 years ago, 2 years ago in Ottawa, one of the saddest thing that we were sharing among us who were coming from civil society was the fact that really around the world, there seems to be a deep loss of citizen trust in government. And we were quite dismayed collectively as civil society. But we also felt collectively that we cannot stop. We're part of open government partnership mechanisms in our respective countries. And while the implications of the loss of trust are far-reaching and threatening the very foundation of democracy in many countries, we cannot give up. So that's why sometimes the temptation is great to give up, but we are not giving up. And we will continue to hold hands with Secretary Wendell. As long as he is there, please be there for a longer period of time. We will continue to hold hands with everyone who we represent in this table, in this steering committee table. We are not here for ourselves, we are here for everybody in this country. We know that we can succeed, we can be better, we can be a braver steering committee if we are more open, really, to one another. So maraming salamat yun po. Sa lahat ng umattend, it looks like we reached a 100 plus participation in this forum, and I look forward really to hearing. Sayang di natin nasali. We really have local commitments, no, from South Cot, and I think from one from Bohol na ano. Those are local commitments to the directly directed to the OGP Global. They have committed to a plan. So we hope to see more local government units developing their own plans. We hope to see more active participation in the steering committee by all our members who represent the sectors, brave members of the sector, unafraid, but really always we hold, like I said, we will always hold on to our commitment to justice, to peace, to democracy and good governance, and as well as to kindness and compassion, especially at this time of the pandemic. So maraming salamat po sa inyo.
Daghang salamat, Miss Pat. Oh, preempt na nimo ang closing remarks, but we will take that as your closing already, no?
Yes, yes.
Again, oh, we still have questions coming from the chat box. We promise to probably solicit the responses of our government panelists and non-government panelists here in the discussion group. But we will also be taking note, no, of some of the concerns that you have raised this morning as the steering committee meets, no, in order to try to explore ways forward, not just in terms of monitoring the commitment of the fifth national action plan, but entering into the co-creation process already for the sixth national action plan. So we promise not to respond to the points that were raised and the questions raised from our participants. So again, thank you so much to our panel discussants, Secretary Wendell Avisado, Assistant Secretary Carlos Bernardo Abad Santos, Governor Daquila Carlo Cua, and from the non-government SteerCom, Ms. Andrea Maria Patricia Serenas, Dr. Annie Heron, Mr. Ruben Pascual, and Dr. Ador Torneo of the La Salle Institute of Governance. So thank you so much for your thoughts and your insights on 10 years, no, of the Philippine OGP Steering Committee. As way of synthesis, I won't dwell. I'm sure it's still fresh in your minds, so the points that were raised by our panel discussants, and also based on their answers to your question. But the theme for today, with the steering com in focus, and for the next series of learning sessions lined up, is really to explore the various governance aspects of the theme sustaining open and participatory government in the time of pandemic. No, so um, we started out in terms of our look back from the past and present steering com I'd like to use the prophet Sir Santi's words, no, in terms of the ambitions of open government partnership here in our country as really aiming for the sky with our feet on the ground, no, so grounded on the realities of our communities and in the context of our local governments and the challenges that they face. But I would like to end also that point by tying it up with the points raised by Sir Ruben in terms of how do we move forward, how do we make the principles of open government not just not separate, no, of what we are, of how we live our life, of it becoming a culture of us as citizens of this country, but really living out, the principles in our everyday life, and not compartmentalized as national commitments only, no, or as commitments of national agencies or even local governments, no. So moving forward, I think the words of Sir Ruben are very good to just sum up the panel discussion. We already have a good process in place. This is something that we can adopt, whether it's crisis management for pandemic response and pandemic governance, but in all aspects of governance life, no, in our country, both national and local. Um, and to also look at three areas, so the budget process, how do we started with the grassroots budgeting where we had communities influencing or informing national budget priorities. So how do we continue the process that was started at the outset of open government partnership here? How do we also maximize this platform, no, for audit of expenses with regards to with regards to how we government spends money, or even for civil society, how do we make efficient use of the funds that are entrusted to us? And lastly, to moving forward, no, to look hopefully to also invite other stakeholders from the communities to be part of a braver open government process. So those I think are the highlights from this morning's discussion. I thank you all very much. Thank you also to our participants for your um, for your mind-tickling questions, no, which we hope to consider when the steering committee sits down and meets soon. So to formally, Miss Pat, would you want to again give a short message just to close this section?
Just to say thank you, Miss Catherine, and the rest of the members of the steering committee, especially to Secretary Wendell Abisado. Uh, Thank you and have a good Open Government Week. We have a lot more stored for you. Just watch, refer to the OGP website or the OGP Facebook page. Nandun ho lahat ng announcement for that. Very interesting fora uh, where we can share and learn from one another. Maraming salamat po. And God bless.
Daghang salamat. God bless you also, Miss Pat, in Davao. Before we end, no, may we request all of you to please accomplish the evaluation form that will be sent through your email, or I think Jen posted the link to the evaluation form. We would appreciate your feedback really to help us at the steering committee and the DBM and Code NGO Secretariat to know how we can improve further on the sessions, especially the sessions we have lined up for the rest of the week. Again, this is the Open Government Week 2021 celebration, and we have exciting series of learning sessions, no, lined up. Please refer to the Facebook page and other social media accounts of Philippine Open Government Partnership for the schedule, the registration link, and the session designs. This afternoon, we will come back at 2 o'clock. So we invite all of you, if you are interested, to look into how the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, as a commitment holder in the fifth National Action Plan, will try to explore, no, the theme on building up pictures of transparency in our indigenous people's community. So the link for registration and to enter the Zoom platform is already posted in the Facebook page of PH-OGP. The rest of the activities, again, is also posted. So, once more, daghang salamat for your time, for being part of our kick-off session for Open Gov Week. As Miss Patricia Serenas has said, let us continue to be kind and compassionate, to stay safe and take care of one another. Mabuhi ang Open Government Partnership, mabuhi kitang tanan. Daghang salamat. Let's please, may photo op ba, Jen? Or, yes, maybe we would like to invite